During a peaceful Christmas dinner at my son's home, everything seemed ideal until I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was firm and urgent. "Return home immediately." Confused, I tried to question them, but the person simply repeated, "Trust me and go now," before hanging up. Something in that voice made me rise from the table and leave without hesitation. When I finally arrived home, what I discovered forever changed my perspective on family, trust, and the true meaning of betrayal. But before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. Everything began the day before Christmas when the phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, that worn leather one that Robert, my late husband, cherished. It had been 5 years since his passing, and the holidays were never the same. The house felt too quiet, too spacious for a 68-year-old widower. When I answered, I immediately recognized my son Michael's voice. His tone was cold, distant, as if speaking to a stranger rather than his own father. "Dad, we've decided to spend Christmas only with our immediate family this year, without you." His words hit like stones in my stomach. I sat paralyzed, hearing the fireplace crackle behind me while the colorful Christmas lights from the neighbors' decorations blinked through the window, now seeming to mock my sudden loneliness. "But son, have I done something wrong?" "Nothing happened," he replied dryly. "I just want a peaceful holiday. Rachel completely supports this decision." My chest tightened hearing my daughter-in-law Rachel's name, who always saved the turkey wishbone for me every year. The same woman who had called last month asking for Robert's stuffing recipe. How could she agree to this? After hanging up, I remained motionless in my chair for a long time, watching the Christmas lights outside blur through the moisture in my eyes. The antique clock in the hallway chimed 8 times, each note seeming to echo the finality in my son's voice. Through the window, I saw snow beginning to fall in thick flakes. Neighbors' houses glowed with warm yellow light. Families gathered around dinner tables sharing stories and laughter. The Andersons across the street had their tree visible through the front window, presents already wrapped, waiting underneath. "What did I do wrong, Robert?" I whispered to my reflection in the cold window. I traced my finger through the condensation, drawing meaningless patterns while my mind replayed every recent interaction with Michael. Had I been too insistent about maintaining our traditions? Too inflexible about preserving Robert's memory through our Christmas rituals? The night dragged slowly. The fire died in the fireplace, leaving only cold ashes and the smell of burnt wood. I went to the kitchen and mechanically prepared soup I knew I wouldn't eat. While the microwave hummed, my mind kept returning to Michael's voice, searching for clues I might have missed. I decided to look through my contact book. Perhaps I should call back, apologize for whatever I had done wrong. Opening the desk drawer, another object fell out with it. Robert's old photo album. My hands trembled as I opened it. On the first page, Michael at 5 years old, gap-toothed grin stretching from ear to ear, holding a wooden toy airplane under our Christmas tree. I turned the page carefully. Robert in our old kitchen, flour dusting his brown hair like snow, laughing while rolling out sugar cookie dough. The next photo took my breath away completely. The 3 of us together, Robert holding baby Michael against his chest and me, younger, with an arm around both, all smiling at the camera. We seemed invincible then, as if nothing could separate us. I remembered that Christmas morning 15 years ago. Michael coming down the stairs in his superhero pajamas, Robert making his famous cinnamon rolls while I pretended to be surprised by the boy's excitement. When had that wonder died? When had my son become this cold stranger? I flipped through more pages, each photograph a small knife twisting deeper into my heart. Robert's last Christmas 5 years ago, when cancer had already weakened his hands, but he still insisted on wrapping each gift himself. Michael had visited less frequently that year, making excuses about work and obligations. "Keep the family together, Edward," Robert had whispered during his final week, his eyes clouded with morphine. "Promise me you won't let distance grow between you and Michael." I had promised, but now I wondered, had I failed him so completely? The microwave beeped insistently, but I ignored it. Nothing mattered except these memories frozen in time, when we were a whole family. I closed the album carefully, but took out the photo of Robert laughing in our kitchen. This I placed on my nightstand where I could see his smile upon waking. As I prepared for bed, Robert's side of the bed seemed vast and empty, as it had been for 5 long years. But tonight felt even more hollow, as if losing Michael had doubled the loneliness that already inhabited these rooms. Morning light filtered through poorly closed curtains, casting gray shadows over my breakfast table. The newspaper lay folded beside a bowl of oatmeal that cooled while I read the obituaries, a habit that seemed more relevant each passing year. The electronic ring of the telephone startled me, making my spoon clatter against the bowl. After last night's conversation, any unexpected call seemed like a threat. I checked the caller ID with trembling fingers, and my heart skipped a beat seeing Michael's name. "Hello?" I answered, my voice more cautious than intended. "Dad." This time I noticed warmth creeping into the edges of that single word. "I want to apologize for yesterday's call. I was completely wrong." Relief flooded through me so quickly I had to grip the table's edge to steady myself. Michael continued explaining that he was stressed about work, and that Rachel had reminded him of the importance of our family traditions. The Christmas dinner invitation was back on the table. "Of course I'll come," I replied immediately, joy bubbling like champagne. "I'll bring your father's turkey recipe and make the cranberry sauce." As we discussed details, something about his enthusiasm seemed hurried, rehearsed, as if he were reading from a script. "Michael, what made you change your mind so suddenly? Yesterday you seemed so certain." "I just realized my mistake, that's all," he responded, his words stumbling over my question. "I need to go. Work calls. See you on Christmas around noon." After we hung up, I stared at the phone, trying to understand the uneasy feeling growing inside me. The words were right, the apology appropriate, but the delivery felt hollow, mechanical. I walked to the kitchen window where yesterday's snow had transformed the yard into a white paradise. The neighbors' children were already building a snowman, their laughter reaching me. Normal families doing normal things on a normal December morning. "Maybe I'm overthinking this," I murmured to Robert's memory. But as I followed my morning routine, that uneasy feeling grew stronger. Michael had avoided any attempt at deeper conversation, rushing off the phone as if he feared inconvenient questions. Something he said echoed in my memory. "Rachel reminded me how important our family traditions are." Since when did Rachel need to remind Michael of something so fundamental? And why mention her support so specifically, as if he needed permission to invite his own father? Despite the doubts, the next 3 days were pure determination. I woke on December 22nd with energy I hadn't felt since Robert's passing, humming Christmas carols while preparing my coffee. My notepad quickly filled with menu plans and shopping lists, each item checked and double-checked. At Morrison's butcher shop on Main Street, I leaned over the counter with the intensity of a man on a mission. "I need your finest turkey," I told the round-faced butcher. "It's for a very special family gathering." The 22-pound turkey he presented looked like something from a magazine, perfect in every way. I paid without negotiating, already imagining the moment I'd carry it into Michael's kitchen. On the 23rd, I went to the mall where crowds moved between brightly lit stores. At the toy store, I chose a model airplane kit for Tommy, my grandson, a vintage Cessna that reminded me of the wooden plane from that old photo. For Emma, I selected an art set with colored pencils arranged like a rainbow in a wooden box. That evening, I harvested herbs from my winter garden for Robert's special marinade. The recipe, written in his careful handwriting, was propped against the sugar bowl as I chopped garlic and stripped rosemary leaves. "Robert, I hope I remember this correctly," I whispered to his photo on the windowsill. "This has to be perfect." The marinade came together like a fragrant green paste. Garlic, rosemary, thyme, olive oil, and Robert's secret ingredient, a touch of white wine. I massaged it under the turkey's skin with careful fingers, feeling as if I were performing an ancient ritual of reconciliation. Christmas Eve morning arrived gray and cold, but my spirits remained high. I wrapped presents with precision, folding sharp corners and tying ribbons with perfect bows. My best Christmas outfit was pressed and ready, cologne applied like armor for the approaching family battle. As evening approached, however, unease began to creep in. Michael hadn't called to confirm details. What time should I arrive? Should I bring wine? Did the children have food allergies I had forgotten? My neighbor Harold appeared at my kitchen window while I cleaned the marinade bowls. "Edward, big plans for tomorrow?" he asked through the glass. "Christmas dinner with Michael and his family," I replied, perhaps too quickly. "We're going to be a real family again." Something flickered in Harold's expression, but he just nodded. "That's wonderful. You deserve happiness." After he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that his question carried weight beyond casual neighborly interest, as if he knew something I didn't. As I lay down on Christmas Eve, everything was ready. The turkey resting in the refrigerator, presents waiting by the door. Everything except my racing heart, which seemed determined to find problems where none existed. Why hadn't Michael called? Why did Harold seem concerned? Why did this reunion feel more like a performance than a reconciliation? I stared at the ceiling until dawn, telling myself that anticipation always brings anxiety. Tomorrow would be perfect. It had to be. Christmas morning dawned crisp and bright, snow glittering like scattered diamonds across the neighborhood. I dressed with ceremonial care, adjusting my outfit and smoothing my stubborn hair. The turkey carrier seemed heavier than expected, as I loaded it into the car along with gift bags. I paused at the front door, key hovering over the lock, and looked back. Empty rooms stared back at me through frost-covered windows, waiting for my return. Something cold touched my spine, a premonition perhaps, but I pushed the feeling away and headed to the car. Today was about family. Today was about healing. The drive to Michael's house crunched under my tires, ice crystals sparkling in the sun. Christmas lights outlined every window and door frame of his house, creating a perfect postcard scene that made my chest tighten with hope. I maneuvered the turkey carrier and bags out of the car, cold air biting my cheeks as I approached the door. Before I could knock, it opened, revealing Rachel's warm smile, flour dusting her red sweater like confectioner's snow. "Edward, so glad you're here. Come in before you freeze." The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. Christmas music drifted from hidden speakers while colorful lights cast rainbow shadows over polished hardwood floors. Tommy appeared at my side like magic, bouncing on his toes with barely contained excitement. Anna and Paul Rodriguez, Rachel's parents, greeted me warmly. Michael appeared last, straightening his tie with movements that seemed too precise, too controlled. His smile reached his mouth but stopped somewhere before his eyes. The table gleamed under soft candlelight. Place settings with Rachel's good china and napkins folded into perfect triangles. My turkey took center stage, golden skin glistening under the chandelier. "Would you like to carve, Edward?" Rachel asked, offering me the electric knife. "You're the artist here." I carved with steady hands, each slice revealing meat so tender it practically fell off the bone. The marinade had worked its magic, herbs creating a fragrant crust that drew murmurs of appreciation around the table. Conversation flowed like wine during dinner. Paul asked about my retirement projects. Anna praised every dish. The children chattered excitedly about school and friends, their voices bright with holiday excitement. Even Michael seemed to relax, sharing work stories that sounded almost natural. But I noticed troubling details, how he checked his watch when he thought no one was looking, how he startled slightly when phones buzzed with notifications. His laughter carried the right notes, but something underneath sounded hollow, like an echo in an empty room. After dessert, we moved to the living room where presents waited. Wrapping paper soon scattered like colorful snow across the carpet. Tommy's eyes widened as he unwrapped the model airplane. "A Cessna just like at the air show. Can we build it together?" "Of course," I promised, feeling warmth spread through my chest. "That's what grandpas are for." Emma hugged her art set, already planning masterpieces. "I'm going to draw our whole family, even great-grandpa Robert, so he can be with us too." The room fell silent for a moment, Robert's absence suddenly present among us like an invisible guest. But it wasn't the sharp pain I had carried for 5 years. It was something gentler, as if he were smiling at us from somewhere distant. As the evening progressed, the meal's warmth enveloped us like a comfortable blanket. Paul and I discussed baseball while Anna helped Rachel with dishes. The children played on the floor with their new treasures, their laughter providing a cheerful soundtrack to our conversation. I loosened my posture and leaned back in the armchair, feeling more content than I had in months. This was what Christmas should be: family together, traditions honored, love shared across generations. My phone vibrated in my jacket pocket, a soft but insistent buzz. I ignored it, not wanting to break the spell of this perfect evening. But it buzzed again, persistent as a determined bee. "Excuse me for a moment," I said to Paul, who was proudly describing his grandson's baseball prowess. The small bathroom near the hallway offered the privacy I needed, its door muffling the sounds of family conversation. "Unknown number," glowed on my phone screen. I almost declined. Who calls on Christmas night except telemarketers or scammers? But when it stopped ringing and immediately started again, irritation overcame caution. "Hello? Who's calling on Christmas? You need to go home immediately." The voice cut through pleasantries like a blade. A man, urgent, unfamiliar. I blinked at my reflection in the mirror, watching my expression change from annoyance to confusion. "Who is this? What are you talking about?" "That doesn't matter now. Just go home." My hand gripped the phone tighter. Behind the door, I could hear Tommy explaining airplane parts to his grandmother. Normal sounds of a Christmas evening that suddenly seemed very distant, almost unreal. "I don't understand what you're saying. What's happening? Trust me and go now." The call ended. I stared at the silent phone as if it could explain itself. My reflection in the mirror seemed aged suddenly, worry lines deeper around my eyes. The stranger's voice carried genuine conviction that made my chest tighten with growing anxiety. What could be wrong at home? Fire? Break-in? Had I left something dangerous on? My mind raced through possibilities while my heart accelerated. But this was Christmas dinner, my first real family gathering in 5 years. How could I leave based on an enigmatic warning from a stranger? Through the door, I heard Michael laugh at something Paul said, the sound sharp and overly bright. My reflection stared back at me with worried eyes, Christmas lights from the hallway casting red and green shadows on my tense face. The stranger's voice echoed in my memory. "Trust me, and go now." Trust whom? Why? What emergency could possibly require such urgency that a stranger would track down my number on Christmas night? Even as questions multiplied, my body was already responding to primitive alarm signals. My shoulders had tensed. My breathing had become shallow. Some ancient part of my brain screamed that this call wasn't random. I thought of my empty house in December's darkness. What if someone was inside ransacking my belongings? What if it was flooding or burning? "Dad, you okay in there?" Michael's voice came through the door, concerned and perfectly timed. "Just a minute," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I took a deep breath, preparing for what came next. The stranger's urgency had infected me. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't explain it, couldn't pretend Christmas dinner was more important than this growing certainty that something was very wrong. When I opened the door, the familiar warm scene suddenly seemed strange. Children's laughter, adults chatting over coffee, the soft glow of lights that had seemed so welcoming an hour before. "Everything all right, Dad?" Michael looked up, something flickering behind his eyes that could be concern or calculation. "I need to go home," I said more abruptly than intended. "There's an emergency. Someone called. Something's wrong at the house." The room grew quiet except for Tommy's model airplane making flying sounds as it navigated between furniture. "What kind of emergency?" Rachel asked, dish towel still in her hands. My fingers fumbled with coat buttons, muscle memory failing under stress. "I don't know yet. They just said I need to go home immediately." Michael stood up, his face the picture of worried confusion. Who called? Why didn't they explain what was wrong? For a split second, I studied my son's expression, searching for something I couldn't name. His concern seemed genuine, but there was something underneath, a tension that didn't match his words. I have to go. I bent down to kiss the children goodbye, their little faces staring at me with innocent perplexity. Thank you for a wonderful Christmas dinner. I'm sorry to leave like this. The cold December air hit my face like a slap as I hurried to the car. In the rearview mirror, I saw the family grouped in the doorway, Rachel hugging herself against the cold, Paul shaking his head, the children pressing their faces to the window. Michael stood slightly apart from the group, his dark silhouette against the warm light spilling from inside the house. The suburban streets stretched empty before me, Christmas lights twinkling from house to house like distant stars. The radio played Silent Night, but nothing about this night felt silent or holy. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That mysterious voice repeated in my mind with each mile. Trust me and go now. But trust whom and why? The speedometer crept past the limit as empty intersections blurred by. I ran a yellow light, then another, driven by some primitive instinct screaming danger. Could it be a break-in? Someone saw the dark, empty house on Christmas night, easy prey while the owner celebrated with family. But how would a stranger get my phone number? How would they know I wasn't home? My mind returned to Michael's behavior during dinner, the way he checked his watch, that forced laughter, the relief that had flickered across his face when I announced my departure. Was I imagining connections that didn't exist? Or had my son seemed almost eager to see me leave? I entered my neighborhood, noticing how few houses showed signs of life. Christmas night in suburbia meant families gathered inside, curtains drawn against the cold, perfect conditions for crime. My house sat dark at the end of the street, exactly as I'd left it, but something felt wrong, a subtlety that made my skin crawl before I could even identify what had changed. I parked behind Harold's oak tree instead of my own driveway, some instinct demanding discretion. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the crystalline night. Cold bit my face as I got out of the car, every sense suddenly alert. The familiar street seemed different through the lens of potential danger, shadows deeper, ordinary objects transformed into hiding places or potential weapons. My house crouched dark against the starry sky, but something was wrong with its silhouette. A basement window that should have reflected streetlight showed only darkness. Broken glass glittered in the snow below like scattered diamonds. Someone was inside. I fumbled for my phone with numb fingers, dialing 911 while crouching behind Harold's fence. A flashlight beam swept across my upstairs bedroom window, methodical and deliberate. Whoever was in there wasn't panicking. They were searching. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my house, I whispered, watching the light disappear and reappear in different windows. I can see them moving around inside with a flashlight. The dispatcher took my address and instructed me to stay away from the house until officers arrived, approximately 15 minutes. An eternity for a burglar to take everything valuable and disappear into the night. I hung up and popped my trunk, hands shaking as I searched for forgotten tools. My fingers closed around cold metal, a tire iron left from a spring tire change. The weight felt solid, reassuring. Whoever was violating my home would find more resistance than they'd bargained for. I crept around the house's perimeter, using Christmas decorations and snow-covered bushes as cover. The broken basement window told the story, jagged glass teeth pointing inward, snow scattered on the floor where the intruder had entered. The flashlight beam moved systematically through my bedroom, pausing at the dresser where Robert's jewelry box sat, then at the closet where I kept important documents. This wasn't random vandalism or drug-fueled desperation. Someone was looking for specific things. My hands tightened around the tire iron as protective rage flooded my system. This was my home, my sanctuary, my life with Robert that some criminal thought they could just steal as if it meant nothing. I positioned myself in the shadows beside the broken window, ears straining for sounds from inside. Footsteps creaked upstairs, someone moving purposefully through rooms containing 40 years of memories. The flashlight beam swept back and forth like a lighthouse, always searching. What were they looking for? Money, jewelry, electronics, or something more specific, more personal? The footsteps moved toward the stairs, descending to the basement, toward me. My breath came in short puffs that vaporized in the frigid air, every muscle tense as I pressed against the house's foundation, tire iron raised. Whoever emerged from that window would come face to face with a very angry homeowner. The basement light flickered briefly, then went dark again. Cautious, intelligent, but not intelligent enough to expect me in the shadows. Papers rustled inside, documents being examined, selected. The sound made my stomach clench with violation. Those were private papers, personal records, fragments of the life Robert and I had built together. How dare some stranger put their dirty hands on our private affairs? A chair scraped across the basement floor. Drawers opened and closed with soft thuds. The methodical search continued without hurry, despite the risk of discovery. Whoever was inside felt safe, confident they had time to find what they wanted. The flashlight beam approached the broken window, casting long shadows across the snowy yard. I pressed closer to the brick wall, tire iron trembling in my grip from cold and adrenaline. A bag appeared first, dark canvas stuffed with papers and small objects. Then a leg, carefully testing the window frame before committing to the exit. I held my breath, every muscle ready for action. One more second and I'd have my answers about who thought they could rob Edward Martinez on Christmas night. The second leg emerged from the window, followed by a torso I recognized with sickening clarity. Danny Watson, my son's longtime friend, straightened in my yard, clutching a bag stuffed with what looked like documents and valuables. Danny. I stepped from the shadows, tire iron raised, my voice cutting the silence like a whip. He spun around, nearly losing his balance on the slippery ground. The bag fell from his startled grip, papers scattering across the snow like confetti. His face went pale as a ghost in the dim light from neighboring houses. Edward, I didn't want to. This wasn't my idea. Whose idea was it then? I moved closer, the tire iron heavy in my hands. Documents were scattered at his feet. Robert's will, bank statements, stock certificates. Danny raised his hands, backing against the wall with nowhere to run. He said you'd be at dinner for hours. He said you'd never know. Who said that? But even as I asked, cold understanding was already crystallizing in my chest like ice forming around my heart. Michael knew you'd be at dinner. The words tumbled out in panic. He planned this whole Christmas reunion so I could... The tire iron slipped from my fingers, suddenly weightless, hitting the snow with a muffled thud. My son sent you. Danny nodded miserably, tears streaming down his face in the cold air. He needed Robert's will, the Boeing stock certificates. He said you were going to donate millions to charity instead of family. Every word hit like a physical blow. I staggered backward, staring at papers scattered in the snow, Robert's careful handwriting on legal documents, stock certificates worth more money than most people saw in a lifetime. The savings of our existence reduced to theft targets. The Christmas dinner. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The apology, the invitation. It was all fake. He's desperate, Edward. Danny crawled on his knees, trying to gather the scattered documents with shaking hands. Gambling debts, bad investments. He owes people who don't forgive late payments. My legs weakened as the full extent of the betrayal settled in. Michael had looked me in the eyes across that dinner table, had accepted my turkey and gifts, had let his children climb on my lap, all while knowing his friend was ransacking my house. How much does he owe? Close to $200,000, Danny's voice was barely audible. He found out about the Boeing stocks in Robert's inheritance papers, said it was family money anyway, that you'd understand eventually. Family money. Robert's legacy, carefully preserved and invested over decades, reduced to gambling debt payment. The stocks he'd bought with his teacher's salary, penny by penny, trusting his husband would use them wisely. I picked up one of the scattered certificates, Robert's name printed in careful script at the top. $2.3 million in Boeing stock purchased over 30 years when the company was struggling and shares were cheap. His retirement nest egg, his security blanket against an uncertain future. He was going to steal my husband's life savings to pay gambling debts. Danny nodded, no longer trying to collect the papers. He said you'd never miss it, that old people don't need so much money anyway. The casual cruelty of it, dismissing 68 years of life as irrelevant, reducing Robert's memory to a theft target, made something inside me crack like ice on a frozen lake. My phone began ringing, the shrill sound piercing the winter silence. I looked at the screen, Michael calling. "He's probably wondering why you left dinner early," Danny said miserably. "He'll be furious I got caught." I stared at my son's name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Behind me, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. In front of me, scattered in the snow, lay the wreckage of Robert's trust and my faith in family. The phone kept ringing, insistent as guilt, demanding as greed. The sirens wailed closer, red and blue lights beginning to flicker through bare tree branches like some twisted Christmas display. I stood over Danny, who remained huddled in the snow beside my scattered documents, his confessions still echoing in the frigid air. 2 police cruisers rounded the corner, their headlights sweeping across my yard and illuminating the broken window like evidence in a crime scene photo. Officers emerged with practiced efficiency, hands resting on their belts, eyes quickly assessing the situation. "Sir, are you the homeowner who called 911? The officer approached with calm authority, her badge reflecting Christmas lights from neighboring houses. "Edward Martinez. This is my house, and that man broke into it." I pointed at Danny, who raised his hands higher as if surrendering to an army instead of 2 suburban police officers. The second officer knelt beside Danny, beginning the familiar ritual of rights and handcuffs, while his partner focused on me. "What was stolen, Mr. Martinez?" I picked up Robert's will from the wet snow, its edges darkened with moisture but the text still legible. "He took financial documents, my late husband's will, Boeing stock certificates worth over $2 million, banking information. $2 million. The officer's eyebrows rose as she examined the water-stained papers. That's felony territory. Harold Lawson appeared from his house, robe tied over pajamas, slippers squeaking in the snow as he approached. His wrinkled face showed relief mixed with concern. "Harold, was it you who called me?" I asked, pieces finally clicking together. "I saw someone with a flashlight moving through your house around 9, he said, nodding to the officers. "Couldn't just ignore that on Christmas night. Had to track down your number in the neighborhood directory. You saved more than just my belongings tonight." I squeezed his shoulder, grateful for neighbors who still cared enough to get involved. The officer looked between us with growing understanding. So this wasn't a random break-in. Mr. Watson here knew the house would be empty. "He's my son's friend," I said, the words tasting bitter. "My son knew I'd be at his house for Christmas dinner. He planned all of this." Danny, now handcuffed and sitting in the back of the patrol car, stared through the window with the expression of someone watching his entire future collapse. The officer taking his statement nodded gravely as details emerged: the gambling debts, the planned theft, the manipulation of family traditions. My phone rang again, the shrill sound jarring against the official atmosphere of the crime scene. Michael's name on the screen like an accusation. "Should I answer?" I asked the officer. "Go ahead. Might be interesting to hear what he says." I accepted the call, putting it on speaker so they could listen. "Hello, Michael. Dad, where are you? We're all getting worried. You've been gone over an hour." His voice carried exactly the right mixture of concern and confusion. "I'm coming back, son. We need to have a conversation." Silence stretched across the connection, and I could almost hear Michael's mind racing to interpret my tone. "Is everything okay? You sound different." "Everything will be clear very soon." I ended the call before he could ask more questions. The officers finished their paperwork while I collected the scattered documents, each piece of paper representing a fragment of Robert's legacy that had almost been stolen by his own son. The Boeing stock certificates felt heavier in my hands than their physical weight suggested. 30 years of Robert's careful investment, saved penny by penny from his teacher's salary. "We'll need you to come in tomorrow to finalize your statement." The officer handed me her card. "Mr. Watson will be charged with breaking and entering, attempted grand theft, and probably other violations once we sort everything out." Harold walked me to my car as the patrol cars pulled away, Danny's pale face visible through the rear window, like a ghost of Christmas future. "You sure you're okay to drive back there?" Harold asked. That's going to be a difficult conversation. I looked at my house one last time, the broken window, the disturbed snow, the Christmas wreath on the front door that suddenly seemed to mock any notion of peace on earth. Some conversations can't wait, Harold. Some truths need to be told while they're fresh. My car started reluctantly in the cold, the engine protesting. As I backed out of the driveway, my headlights swept across the Christmas decorations on the door, their cheerful red bow a bitter contrast to the family destruction I was about to unleash. But Robert's will was safe beside me on the passenger seat, rescued from theft and betrayal. Whatever happened next, his legacy would be protected. When I arrived at Michael's house, the warm glow from windows and twinkling lights created a perfect facade of family happiness. Through the front window, I could see silhouettes moving in the living room, my son pacing near the Christmas tree, while Rachel gestured with obvious concern. The recovered documents lay on the passenger seat like evidence in a court case. Robert's will, slightly damp but perfectly legible, the stock certificates bearing his careful signature from decades past. I gathered them carefully, each paper a weapon in the battle for truth I was about to wage. I didn't knock. This was still family, even though that word had been poisoned by greed and betrayal. The front door opened to a scene of worried domesticity. Rachel folding dish towels near the kitchen entrance, Paul reading a magazine while Anna worked on a crossword, the children sprawled on the carpet with their new toys. Everyone looked up when I entered, and I watched Michael's face transform from relief to confusion, to growing alarm as he noticed my expression. "Edward, thank God." Rachel hurried toward me, genuine concern in her features. "What happened? You look terrible." "Ask your husband what happened, Rachel." I placed the documents on the coffee table with deliberate ceremony, arranging them so everyone could see Robert's familiar handwriting on the will, the official Boeing letterhead on the certificates, the routing numbers on financial statements. Michael stared at the papers as if they were evidence of his own execution. "Dad, I don't understand what you're talking about. These are Robert's will and Boeing stock certificates that Danny tried to steal tonight. He's currently in police custody, charged with breaking and entering an attempted grand theft." Paul's magazine slipped from his hands. "Stock certificates? What stocks?" "Robert left me Boeing stock worth $2.3 million. He bought them over 30 years, investing his teacher's salary when the company was struggling." I watched each face process this information. Surprise, confusion, growing understanding. "He found out I planned to donate the inheritance to veterans organizations and educational charities. Michael discovered this and couldn't bear the thought of me donating millions to charity instead of family. Dad, that's our family inheritance." Michael's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing the desperation underneath. "You can't just give it all away to strangers. I can do whatever I want with my money, but you decided to steal it instead of talking to me." Rachel sank onto the couch, one hand covering her mouth as the pieces fell into place. The Christmas dinner, the sudden reconciliation, it was all fake to give Michael an alibi while his friend robbed my house. "He's desperate, Edward." Danny had crawled on his knees trying to gather the scattered documents. Gambling debts, bad investments. He owes people who don't forgive late payments. Anna's crossword fell to the floor, forgotten. "Michael, please tell us this isn't true." But Michael could no longer deny it. The evidence was spread across the coffee table, and his friend's arrest had removed any possibility of covering up the conspiracy. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said, his voice breaking. "The debts, the people I owe money to." "How much?" Paul's voice carried the authority of a man who had managed finances his entire life. $200,000. Michael's admission fell into the room like a bomb. Bad investments, some gambling. It started small but grew so fast. "So you decided to steal from your father?" Rachel's voice cracked. "Use our children as props in a criminal scheme?" Tommy looked up from his model airplane, sensing adult tensions he couldn't understand. "Why is everyone yelling?" Emma clutched her new art supplies closer, colored pencils scattered across the carpet like rainbow fragments of the family breaking apart around her. "Your father made very bad choices," I said gently to the children. then looked back at Michael. Choices that hurt people who trusted him. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Michael was completely falling apart now, years of careful deception collapsing under the weight of exposure. I just needed time to fix things, to pay what I owed. By stealing from your father on Christmas night, Paul stood up, his usual calm replaced by moral indignation. Lying to your wife, using your children as alibis. Rachel was crying now, not the gentle tears of holiday sentiment, but the harsh sobs of someone watching her entire life dissolve. How long have you been lying to me about money, about work, about everything? Anna gathered the confused children closer, protecting them from the adult devastation unfolding at their Christmas celebration. I looked around the room, Rachel's tears, the grandparents' shock, the children who didn't understand why their Christmas joy had turned to chaos. My son collapsed in guilt and desperation. This family was destroyed, carved apart by greed as efficiently as any blade. The Boeing stock will go to veterans programs and education funds, exactly as Robert would have wanted. I gathered the documents from the table, preparing to leave this wreckage. He believed in helping others, in building something meaningful. You turned his legacy into a target for theft. I stood to leave, pausing at the door to look back at the destroyed Christmas scene. Rachel still crying, Paul comforting Anna, the children sitting confused among their scattered toys, and Michael hunched in his chair with his head in his hands. Rachel, you and the children are always welcome at my house. You're innocent in this. I walked out into the cold December night, leaving behind the warm lights and the wreckage of what had once been my family. The next morning, light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows over the table where Robert's rescued documents lay neatly arranged beside his photograph. Coffee steamed in my favorite mug, the one he'd given me 20 years ago with "World's Best Husband" printed in faded letters. As I read through the stock certificates with new perspective, I realized they represented more than money. Each purchase date told a story. September 1995, when Boeing struggled with layoffs and Robert saw an opportunity. March 2001, after 9/11. December 2008, during the financial crisis, when others sold in panic and he bought with faith. My phone rang, interrupting the peaceful morning routine. Rachel's name on the caller ID made my chest tighten with concern. "Edward, I'm so sorry." Her voice hoarse from crying but determined. "I never knew about Michael's plans, about any of this. Rachel, none of this is your fault. You're a good woman who trusted the wrong man. I'm filing for divorce." The words came out rushed. "The children don't deserve a criminal father, and I won't live with someone who could do what he did. You're welcome in my life always. You and the children. Thank you. That means everything right now." Robert's legacy would be protected from greed, used for purposes he would have supported. The house felt different now, not lonely, but peaceful. The pretense was gone, the deception lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "The kids want to know when they can visit Grandpa Edward again." I smiled, typing back, "Anytime. We'll build new traditions." Looking at Robert's photograph on the mantel, I felt his presence guiding my decisions. The money he had saved would help veterans find jobs, fund scholarships for teachers like him, support programs that strengthen families. "His stocks will help people build better lives," I said to his image, "exactly as you would have wanted." Michael had chosen greed over family, lies over love, theft over trust. I chose honor over blood, truth over convenience, integrity over comfort. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles that danced like tiny prayers in the golden light. Outside, snow covered the neighborhood in pristine white, offering the promise of new beginnings. The future stretched ahead, smaller than I had planned, but cleaner, more honest, built on foundations that wouldn't crumble under pressure. Robert's legacy was safe. Truth had won over deception. Real family, the kind built on love and respect rather than blood and obligation, would continue. That was enough. That was everything. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video appearing on the screen because it contains a story of betrayal and plot twists like you've never seen before.